Hi everyone, welcome to our revision session today and thank you for coming. We're going to kick off in a couple of minutes and our first tutor speaking today will be Evelyn, who is giving us some tips on how to revise for GCSE maths. So I'm going to hand over to you, Evelyn, so you can start getting ready.
Thank you. Right, I'll start in a couple of minutes when a few more people have joined. Right, so I'm going to get started. Hi everyone, my name is Evelyn. I am a maths tutor and today, for the first 15 minutes of this session, I'm going to be going through maths revision tips. So in particularly, I'm going to be going through revision tips and some useful resources for GCSE maths. Someone's already asked me, am I going to go through revision methods for every subject? I'm only going to be going through maths, but there are going to be some other tutors going through some different subjects as well throughout the hour. So so stay tuned, don't leave after I've finished. Right, so let's go on to the first slide. So the first tip that I'm going to go through with all of you today is using the traffic light system. Now, I know some students do this, but not all students do this, and I do think it is really, really helpful. So first of all, what you should do is find your exam specification. Now, you might be doing a different maths exam or a different exam board to some of your friends, so don't just copy what they're doing. Whether you're doing AQA, OCR, Edexcel, you pick that particular exam board and then you find your exam specification. So whether you're doing foundation maths or higher maths or whichever one you're doing, you find that one. Once you've found it, you can either have it as a PDF or you can print it. But what I suggest you do is go through all of the topics and determine how well you understand those topics. So let's say you've got simultaneous equations. If you really understand it, that's great. The next thing that you're going to do is color code it and highlight each topic depending on how well you know it. So if you really know simultaneous equations, I'd like you to highlight that or tick it green. If you come across quadratic equations, you're not too sure about that, sort of understand it, but you'd like some more practice, you can either take it yellow or orange. And then if you completely don't understand the topic and you probably need a lot more help with it, you should take it red. So this really helps you identify which topics you need to work on a bit more and also see how you've improved as well. So after a month or two, once you've gone through your revision, or after a couple of weeks, once you've gone through your revision and you think you've improved a little bit, go back, print another exam specification off and then retick them, correct them, change the colors on them. And however you've changed, you can see whether you know more topics, whether you've fallen a little bit behind. It's really easy to keep on top of it. So on the right, I've just got the traffic light system and how it can help you. So red, I don't understand it, I need some help. Orange, I understand some of it, but need more practice. And green, I'm confident and understand this topic. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Hopefully it does help you as well. If you do have any questions or anything throughout this session as well, just put it in the Q&A and I'll have a look as we're going through. Right, the next sort of thing I'd like to go through in today's session in regards to maths is practice past papers. Maths is one of those subjects where you need to continuously practice how to do it. It's not good enough to just read through your notes. You have to make sure that you are going through practice questions or past paper questions to make sure that you know how to apply these methods. Now, for you guys who are taking your GCSE Maths 9 to 1 exam, there's only a few GCSE maths past papers for your type of GCSE, because I think it only goes back to 2017. So I would suggest leaving those exam papers, those past paper exam papers, towards or nearer to your exam. If you do them all the way in April and your exam's in June, it doesn't really help you, because these are the best sort of model questions that you will get in your exam. So you should leave them closer to your exam. Now, I'm not saying do it the night before, but maybe a week or two before, so you're a little bit more prepared for it. When you do go through these past papers, I'd like you guys to treat it as if it was the real thing. If you get used to sitting down for an hour and a half, going through your paper, you're not distracted by anyone or your phone or anything nearby you. You make sure you use a calculator only for the calculator exam, and you don't use a calculator for a non-calculator exam. When it gets to the exam, it will become easier. It won't be so new to you. You'll be very used to it, and it will help reduce the amount of nerves that affect you in your exam as well. So always treat these past papers as if it was a real thing. Also, make sure you time yourself. One thing that a lot of students struggle with when they end up taking their exams is their timing. I would always suggest when you go into your exam, make sure you have a watch on you, because you don't know where you're going to be sitting in the room. You don't know whether you're going to be able to see the clock properly or not. Even though you should be able to, it's always good to make sure you have a watch on you. When you're doing your past papers, make sure you have a watch on you as well. You get used to timing yourself. One sort of trick that I always tell my students is, when you're going through papers, look at the number of marks each question is worth and try and stick to a minute a mark. That will help you stay on track with your timing. But yeah, timing, making sure you time yourself when you're doing practice past papers as well is really, really important, so you don't run out of time in the real exam and you get used to it. The last point is probably the biggest point that I like to make. When you are doing past papers, a lot of students forget to do this. When I was studying as well for my GCSEs, I would sometimes forget this as well. Mark the paper before you move on to the next one and make a note of what you get wrong. A lot of students tend to say, okay, I'm going to do, I don't know, 3 practice papers or 3 past papers today, and then I'll go on to something else tomorrow. You end up doing these papers, you time yourself, you make sure that you treat it as a real thing, that's brilliant, but you've just done 3 papers and you have no clue what you got wrong from what you got right. That's not good, because as much as you are practicing them, you're not actually reflecting and reviewing what you need to focus on before you take the next one, or what you need to improve on. And it's really important. Make sure you mark the paper before you move on. Always mark it as soon as you've done it, or mark it on the same day that you've done it, so you remember what sort of process you took when you were taking those questions. One thing that I would advise as well, when you're going through the mark scheme, try and understand what the examiner is looking for. If you know what they're looking for, you'll know how to answer your exam questions in your actual exam even better, because you know what you should be writing down and how you should be writing it down as well. On certain maths websites, you can also find model solutions, which is really good. I know examsolutions.net is one really good website that gives you model solutions to past papers, so you can see how to write down your answers and how how examiners are expecting you to answer them. And when you do go through the paper, it's not good enough to just tick and cross and say, okay, I got this percentage or I got this amount of marks. You need to write down the topics and the areas where you need improvement. That way, when it comes to you revising, you know which topics you need to work on a little bit more, and you know which ones you can say, okay, I know them. I don't really need to go through it as much as I need to go through this topic. So it's really important to make sure you know where you're going wrong and where you are going right. Right, so I've already got a few questions. I'm going to go through and answer some of them. Someone asked, how should we revise for further maths? It's very similar to, well, the exam specification isn't similar to maths GCSE, but the process of revising for further maths is very similar to the process of revising for normal GCSEs. Go through your specification, do your traffic light system, focus on the topics which are in red and orange, and then go through past papers and practice questions. Also time yourself. It's very, very similar to the way how you prepare. It's just different topics which you need to prepare for. Someone said, I'm doing OCR for maths, but could I still look at practice questions from other exam boards? That's exactly what I was going to get onto, which is a brilliant question. A lot of students, I've got it in my bubble at the top, the AQA, Edexcel and OCR, the three main exam boards, and the maths content is very similar. Now, this is not universal for every subject. It's only really for maths. I would only really suggest you do this for maths. I know for the sciences, it's a little bit different, so I wouldn't suggest it. But when you are going through past papers, a lot of math students say, oh, there's not enough past papers or there's not enough practice questions. There are loads. But if you feel like you want to practice some more actual exam past papers, it is okay to go to AQA or Edexcel if you are an OCR student. As long as you know what you need to know for your exam, you can go to those other exam boards and try those past papers because they are very, very similar and the content is very similar. Even the way how they ask questions is very similar. There's not much of a difference between them. So just make sure if you're doing foundation, you do the foundation paper. If you're doing higher, you do the higher paper. Between the different exam boards, but it is okay to use those for practice. Just make sure you focus on your exam boards when you are getting closer to your exams. Someone says, are you allowed, someone said you're allowed a simple watch, not smartwatch. Exactly, you're not allowed a smartwatch because obviously smartwatches use Wi-Fi connection and whatnot. You're only allowed a normal basic watch in your exams. Someone said, does this apply for IGCSE? Yes, these are only revision techniques. So it applies for further maths, IGCSE, foundation, higher GCSE as well. And someone asked, where can you find practice papers? Well, we're going to go through that now. So just because of time, I'm going to go through some resources. What I'd like you guys to do is put some of your favorite maths websites in the chat. So when I'm going through them, you can add some of the ones which I might have missed. There are loads. There's so many different websites out there for you. But these are sort of my sort of favorite ones because they all have something a little bit different about them. So some websites, mathsgenie.uk, that one's pretty good. It mainly focuses on the Edexcel specification, but again, if you're doing AQA or OCR, you can use it. It splits it down into topics, and it also tells you the level of the different topics as well. So it tells you this one's level 1, this one's level 8, and whatnot. Khan Academy is really good for those who like to watch videos and like to watch people go through actual questions. Khan Academy is really, really good for that. You can find them on YouTube as well. Corbett Maths is really good because it has this like 5-a-day worksheet. So for every day of the year, it's got 5 different maths questions for you to go through. So it's a really good way to start your revision. Maths Made Easy is also really good because they have online tests specific to the different topics. Exam Solutions, they provide model solutions for your past paper exams, and BC Bite Size as well is really good for when you're trying to understand the topic. They don't have any practice questions as much, but they do go through the topics in a little bit more detail and give you examples just to show you how to answer a question. And some good revision guides and workbooks. Now, I haven't put down the specific ones because they change yearly and they change depending on your specification. But the textbook that you use at school should be your first go-to, your textbook and a workbook that you use at school. Some different companies that provide some good revision guides and workbooks as well. There's CGP, Let's, Collins, Pearson. You can go to pretty much any bookstore or even online on Amazon or something and find any of these workbooks by any of these publishers. And also your exam board. If you go on the website for your specific exam board, so AQA or EdExcel, they also give you recommended books, like their own revision guides and their own workbooks. That would also be a really good go-to because they're also the ones writing your exam. So, and that would always be the best thing to do. Yeah, so some of you are providing some brilliant ones as well. Someone's asked, are they all free? Majority, all the ones that I've put on here are free. You can literally just go online, Google search them, and you can find loads of resources for yourselves. So that's pretty much the end of my revision session. I'm gonna move you on to Emily.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. So Emily is going to be giving us some revision tips for languages. Emily.
Hi.
Go ahead.
So I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. Okay. Sorry, am I a host yet?
Yeah, I'm just making
okay.
There you go.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm a bit slower. I'm a bit slow with this. Okay. Right. There we go. So can everyone see my screen? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Brilliant. So I'm Emily, and I tutor in French and Spanish, but I'm going to be talking about general language tips just in case people do other languages, which like German, Italian, Mandarin. These revision tips should work for all languages generally. Okay. Okay, so just a couple of things to consider first. Learning whole language is a process. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither Italian wasn't learned in a day either. So you need to sort of be consistent, make sure that you're practicing weekly, every couple of days, and yeah, just make sure that you're not stopping the practice. And then practice is key as well. So doing grammar exercises, doing vocab lists, trying to practice your writing, that's also key. Okay, so the first tip I'd like to talk about is immersing yourself in your target language. Okay, so as I said, this works for any language, of course, and I'm just going to share a few ways to do this. So I'm going with sort of 4 principles. Oops, sorry. Read, watch, listen, and speak. Okay, so first of all, reading. It's always best to keep it short and sweet. So for example, don't go for a massive novel right at the beginning. It's much better to read things like recipes, blogs, sort of just even short stories, those kind of things, just so that you can sort of be consistent with it. So that's my second point, and not be overwhelmed. Third point is keep a vocab book. So if you've got a little exercise book just for vocab, it's really good to just jot down all your all the new vocab that comes up in your reading. And here I've got an extra tip as well. So it's good to try writing a summary of the text in your target language, reusing and sort of, reworking all the vocab that comes up that you find interesting. So say that you read a short story, you could sort of write a summary of that short story, trying to use your language, the target language. So for example, if you read it in French, try to write the summary in French. And then try to use a vocab that you noted down in the vocab book, just to keep on practicing your writing as well. Okay. Right, so I've got a few reading ideas here. So what kind of stuff should I read? Yep, as I mentioned before, recipes, short stories, reading comprehension exercises are good online. So I've got a few sources and suggestions here. So you can use BBC Bite Size, that's a really good site. You can use test.com. Lots of teachers use it, but I sometimes tell my students that they can also find resources there as well. Lingua.com is brilliant. It gives you reading comprehensions on all different levels. So they usually use the European framework, the A1, B2, that kind of thing. So I would suggest for GCSE an A2, and if you really want to challenge yourself, you can go for a B1. But yeah, A2 is meant to be GCSE. So yeah, as I mentioned, it's got loads of languages: French, Spanish, Italian, German. I think it focuses on European languages though. A few recommendations for short stories: books by an author called Ollie Richards, short stories in Spanish and short stories in French. Really good idea to read short stories because they're more interesting and you can get lots of vocab from it. If you want to put some reading ideas in the chat, please do. Please feel free, and then we can go over them later. Okay, so the next one is watch. So I often recommend to my students to basically watch films or series or just YouTube videos and vlogs in the language. So lots of things are available on Netflix. If you've got Amazon Prime, if you want to go for the completely free version, you can just check out videos on YouTube. So I often recommend to watch things in English with the subtitles. For example, if you're learning Spanish, in Spanish, or you can watch something in Spanish and have the subtitles in English. And then if you really want to challenge yourself, you could try watching a Spanish series without subtitles. But yeah, having subtitles is a good way to sort of have a reference and keep on learning and make sure it's not too overwhelming. So I've just got a few recommendations of some series and a film. So you might have heard of some of these. You've got La Casa de Papel, Las Chicas del Cable. For French, you've got a film and a series, and even for German, there's a series called Dark on Netflix. It's really interesting, and Netflix always gives you the option to have subtitles. I mean, for Amazon Prime, I'm sure there's lots of stuff there as well if you've got that. And as I said, YouTube, if you just search anything you like say that you like travel vlogs, try to search travel vlogs in French, travel vlogs in Spanish, or any language that you're learning. Okay, next is listen. So past paper listenings are a really good idea. So what I just want to mention about this is you can use any exam board's past papers. And I usually tell my students to use the exam, to first go for the exam boards that they're not doing and then leave their exam board to last. So say that you're doing Edexcel Spanish, don't go for Edexcel Spanish first, leave that to last. Maybe go for AQA, OCR. Basically, the language is still the same and it still lets you practice. Second thing is podcasts. They can be really good. And music, anything you like, basically. So if you're into rock, try to search Spanish rock. If you're into pop, French pop. Anything that you enjoy, because then it makes it more fun, basically, and you want to do it. An extra tip here is if you're listening to music, you can have a look at the lyrics after you listen to a song that you like. Turn it into a sort of mini reading exercise, basically, where you can sort of just jot down all your vocab in your vocab book that we mentioned earlier. So that's a good way to keep on reading and writing. Right, next, so I've got some example sources here. So for French, if you just look on YouTube, it's completely free. If you just sort of search DELF A2 listenings. As I mentioned before, it's a European framework, and yeah, they've got lots of DELF A2 listenings on there with the solutions at the end. So that's a great way to keep practicing. For Spanish, I would recommend Audiria. It's sort of got sort of podcasts, listening exercises and sound files. And then generally, as I mentioned before, past paper listening, starting with the examples that you yourself are not doing, and BBC Bite Size is really good. So BBC Bite Size can also be used for reading, and yeah, listening. So yeah, I do recommend those sites in general. So if you're doing any other languages, put down in the chat any sort of sites that you like to use. As I said, I tutor French and Spanish, so I know more sites in French and Spanish, but if you do German, Italian, Mandarin, anything, you can recommend them in the chat. Right, finally, it's speak. So I often tell my students to just keep on practicing. So obviously some of you might even have friends who speak the language, maybe even family members, but not everyone is as lucky. So it's always a good idea to sort of speak to the mirror. It might be a bit embarrassing at first, but if you're practicing your sort of speaking paper speech, it's just a good idea to sort of speak into the mirror and basically practice saying those words and putting it into your daily speech, basically. Next, you can speak to friends and family. Obviously, it's best if they also speak the language, but you can just speak at them. Tell your mum or your dad, your auntie, your uncle that you're going to tell them your speech, and just tell them, just like you would do to the mirror. You can even talk to your pet. So an extra tip here is record yourself speaking. Again, it can be embarrassing and a bit, make you feel a bit cringy when you have to listen to yourself. It makes us all feel that way, but it's a really good way to sort of correct your own mistakes. So when you play it back, try to listen out for any mistakes that you made and try to sort of fix those mistakes in future recordings. You can also jot down your mistakes on a piece of paper and then practice those later. Okay, so if you've got any more tips about speaking, listening, all the things that we've mentioned, again, go for the chat and I'll look at them in a second. Okay, so the second tip that I wanted to share was practice grammar exercises in your own time. So basically, don't wait for your teacher to give you grammar exercises for homework. There's lots of really useful stuff online. And as I've said here, using online resources is a really great idea. So just got a couple of useful websites here, again, just for French and Spanish, but again, if you've got ideas for German, Italian, any other language, pop it in the chat. So for French, I often use with my students To Learn French. It gives you the option to have your sort of see the solutions and have your work basically automatically corrected. It's completely free, so that's really great. There's also this other one called Columbia.edu. So if you sort of type into the search bar Columbia.edu French exercises, it comes up with a list of exercises. So for example, the imparfait, the imperative, is really good for pronouns, like the indirect pronouns, and that kind of thing. For Spanish, I really recommend SpanishDict.com. It's a really easy site to use. It's got loads of stuff. So for example, ser versus estar, all the tenses, and just loads of exercises to just keep on practicing. So I really do recommend that. And then again, studyspanish.com. If you sort of search for the grammar side of the website, that's really good to just keep on practicing. There's a free side of the website, lots of stuff for free, and then I think there are certain exercises that you sort of have to subscribe or pay for, but that's definitely not necessary. It's got all the necessary stuff for free as well. Okay. Right, so here I've just got a sort of extra bit to the presentation, just some vocab reference suggestions. Just you could sort of have a look at them. So I've got a few books here to suggest. So I've got Using French Vocabulary and then all the equivalents in lots of languages. So if you just sort of search Using French Vocabulary, Using Russian Vocabulary, you can find it's a sort of big book. I can show you here actually. It's a sort of book like this. And it is quite overwhelming maybe, but it's good to have sort of as a reference. Okay, you can also use websites like Quizlet and Memrise, and then online dictionaries are also good. So I'd go for the reputable ones such as Collins. So you can use word reference and Lingui and all of that kind of stuff, but I would sort of have as my first point of call Collins Dictionary, and it's got different languages from sort of English to French, French to English, Spanish to English, English to Spanish. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I'm just going to have a look at the chat. Okay. Okay, so it says speaking GCSE is cancelled this year because of COVID. Yeah, so yeah, it's good to keep that in mind. But I mean, generally practicing your speaking if you're learning a language is really important. So I would recommend that. Just because it's not being examined, speaking helps you with vocab, learning grammar structures, and all the like, basically. So just because it's cancelled, for example, people who are going to take it into A-level as well, it's likely that their A-level won't be cancelled. So it's just good to keep on practicing. So how to remember speaking questions is another one. So different teachers do it in a different ways. So sometimes you don't have to remember speaking questions, but sometimes teachers prefer to give a sort of set. I mean, yeah, that's not really a language skill per se. It's more just sort of memorizing. So I guess, again, practice, do a little bit every day. Make sure that you don't leave it up all to the last minute. Yeah, so another person said my exam board has cancelled the speaking exam. Yeah, so the same thing. I think that it's a good idea to focus on all aspects, but yeah, I mean, I could just highlight that if you want to revise for a specific exam, so for example, you're reading, do more reading exercises, or you're listening, do more listening exercises. All of these tips are basically there for you to use, but if you feel like you need more practice in one aspect, then yeah, definitely do more reading if you're weaker in reading, or do more listening if you feel like you need more listening practice.
Okay, brilliant. I think so. We're now going to move on to Vicki, who is providing us with English GCSE revision. Thank you so much, Emily. That was brilliant. I think we can all agree that that was really helpful and insightful.
So I'm just going to try to stop sharing now.
That's fine. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Well, Vicki, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Right. Good morning, guys. Let me just grab what I need. Right. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you guys about English, both language and literature, because obviously there's a massive crossover. So I'm going to run through a variety of things that would be really helpful to do in the run up to exams, because English is hard to revise for. It's difficult to know where to start. So first things first is getting your subject knowledge down. So a range of different bits of terminology. So first off, for your, I'm going on AQA here because it's the most popular one, but learning all of this is good for any exam board. They are all very similar, particularly in terms of sort of terminology. So learning your language devices or language features or language techniques, they are all the same thing. They are just said slightly differently. So that's the first one to make sure that you do. The second one is to make sure you learn your structural features. So that will be your paper 1 question 3 on AQA, language devices, paper 1 question 2. So get all of this down and make sure that you are happy identifying it. So there's absolutely loads of stuff online in terms of examples. If you just search examples of personification, loads come up. So the next step with this is, once you've learnt your definitions and you've worked out what's what, is to then start identifying them. So going through either creating some of your own or picking some up on the internet and then turning that into little quizzes, using Quizlet or Kahoot, essentially sort of what you would do for learning any other bits of terminology to get that down to start with. The next one, identifying your word classes. This is really sort of a good thing to do, particularly if you are heading towards those top grades. I've only put what we call content words on here, so nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So content words are essentially words that are easy to define. And then we have function words, which are the little tiny words that are tricky to define. because they essentially help you make up that sentence. But a lot of the time we could take function words away and we could get sort of the gist of what the sentence is saying. So function words are prepositions, so in, out, conjunctions, and, but. What else can we have? Pronouns. So essentially all those really tiny words like and, the, by, which are really tricky to define. So you don't need to worry about those too much. You might have good knowledge of what those are from doing foreign language learning. Knowing them for when it gets to A level is really good. So if you wanted to push yourself and learn them now, so when you get into starting your A levels, then that might be a nice thing to do as well. But essentially don't worry about it for the GCSEs, because there's nothing particularly interesting to say about them at GCSE level. The next one, sentence forms. So you've got 4 sentence forms, which would be really helpful to know. Simple, compound, and complex are nice and straightforward. Minor is a little bit more tricky, but essentially if you've got a 1-word sentence, it's a minor sentence. So go have a look as to what is defined as a minor sentence, because it's a little bit tricksy, and it depends on the type of verb that you are using. But knowing those is brilliant. That will be for your paper 1 question 2 as well. And then you can also, as your additional push, go learn declarative, exclamative, interrogative, and imperative. So declaratives are statements, exclamatives are sentences. These are all types of sentences, by the way. So sentences are statements, exclamative sentences that end in exclamation marks, interrogatives, sentences that are questions, and imperatives, sentences which are instructions. So going off and learning those in terms of just by rote, learning the definitions for all of them, and then start identifying them, making your own up, is a great place to start with the terminology. Websites. So I'm hoping my screen share is going to do the trick with this. So few websites. I thought I'd show you them rather than just sort of pop them up. Emily mentioned TES previously, so this is something that is more geared toward teachers essentially, and it's where you can find loads of resources. So the really nice thing about this is that there are generally, it's nice for teachers because there is lots and lots of lessons and resources on here. However, you can find revision booklets and alike, which would be helpful, and they're quite frequently beautifully made. Now, this is sometimes paid and sometimes free. It's very much dependent. It's down to the person who uploads them. So if you don't want to splash any money, which I haven't on here yet, if you just go to sort by and then go for lowest price first, then you will see all of the free stuff before you get onto the paid stuff. And generally most of the resources on here aren't very expensive anyway, sort of a couple of quid. So it's probably money well spent. Twinkle. So this is mainly a primary resources website. However, they do have Key Stage 3 and 4. So they do have some resources which are Key Stage 4 English and that are geared at GCSEs. Again, a lot of it is lesson plans, but there are some really helpful bits and pieces in terms of, so there's a resource pack here, which has got loads of bits and pieces in it, which is really helpful for revision. Again, some of this is free and some of this is paid. I think it's £9.99 a month subscription, which is what I have, which is like the unlimited ultimate one. But essentially what you could do is spend £9.99, buy a month's subscription and download all the resources that you want and then cancel your subscription. So that's a way to sort of save money a little bit there. Then we've got Save My Exams. This is a paid subscription. I noticed someone mentioned that in the comments during Emily's little stint. So there is not masses and masses of stuff when it comes to English on here, or there wasn't a couple of months ago. I think there's 5 past papers for paper 1 and 5 for paper 2. It doesn't have English literature on here. However, you've got maths, biology, chem and physics on here as well. So as GCSE students, there will be much more and loads of different subjects for you to access on there as well. So it won't just be English, which is brilliant. So that's all of that's included in your subscription. The other one I wanted to point out to you was Mr. Bruff. I'm sure loads of you have come across this chap before. So he is an English teacher that mainly I find his videos the most useful on YouTube, and of course they're free because they're on YouTube. He also does revision guides, and if you really struggle with Shakespeare, he does sort of a modern day translation side to side, which is really good if you want a hard copy of that. Spark Notes does the same. That's just popped up into my head. Spark Notes does the same, and it's free, although it takes a lot of scrolling, and it's not massively user friendly. It takes a bit of patience with it, whereas Mr. Bruff's is nice and easy, straightforward, like a book, which is nice and easy to use. Right, let me just check the chat quickly. Yes, to be honest with you, I don't know whether he does tutoring, but I'm sure it is quite expensive. But his resources I think are relatively cheap. I think they're about £5 a book, which is good. Right, let me pop back onto my PowerPoint. Right, so revision materials. When it comes to buying hard copies of things that would be helpful for you, the one that I think is my personal preference that I really, really like for English literature are the York Notes books. They are absolutely gorgeous. They've got loads and loads of stuff in them. So this one is Jekyll and Hyde. So it's got plot, characterization, themes. What else have we got? It's got questions at the end. It's got form, structure, language, contexts, progress boosters, and further reading on them. And as far as I can see, York Notes does one for every set text, including the poetry bundles as well. So I've personally found these the most useful for the Shakespeare ones, just because I think we all think Shakespeare's a little bit tricky. So personally, Shakespeare ones absolutely fantastic, but they're all brilliant and I really, really recommend. And they are £6 a book and they are absolutely beautiful. And personally, I think it's really money well spent. So that's that. The other one, now I only really teach AQA because that's the most popular one. But this is an absolutely fantastic student book, which I haven't seen being used in a classroom. I did training as an English teacher and I haven't come across it in a classroom setting, but that's not to say that it isn't. So this is the AQA GCSE English Language and English Literature Course Student Book, and it is made by Collins, AQA approved. It is mainly English language. However, some of the things that you will go over, some of the skills. So for example, critical analysis, that's in English literature as well. Comparing text, that's in English literature, but this is pretty much all focused on English language exam, but there are transferable skills. So there aren't any set texts in here, which is the important thing to remember, or at least if there are, they're not in a lot of detail. You're looking at small segments. So that's to bear in mind for that. How are we doing for time? These are the sites that I mentioned in terms of going over these for revision purposes when it comes to learning quotations as well for English literature, and learning all your terminology. So Kahoot, Quizlet. Personally, I love Quizlet. There's lots of things that you can do with your revision packs on there, which I think are quite fun. Kahoot is brilliant if you're revising in a group. I'm not sure how effective it is when it comes to actually on an individual basis, and Gojimo as well. Right, been over revision books. Let me check the chat quickly, see if I've missed anything. Right. Practice papers. I did the practice papers right at the end. There are 10 questions in the English language and 6 in the English literature. Those are both on AQA. You can access some parts of Twinkle for free. Not all resources are free. Scholastic, yeah, absolutely. Right. So when it comes to getting the top grades, this is where your additional reading comes in essentially. So knowing context is brilliant, particularly for your English literature. So understanding Jacobean England, Shakespeare, what he was all about, really, really important. So this is an absolutely beautiful book called The Shakespeare Companion. £15, although I bought it in a sale for about £2. It's got lots of very interesting stuff in there, which is helpful, although I'd say perhaps slightly higher than GCSE. And Bill Bryson's biography of Shakespeare, which I think is really easy and accessible to read, and I would have been happy to read at your age, and I wasn't a big reader when I was doing GCSEs. In terms of context for Victorian England, so this will be good for your 19th century texts and for your paper 2, because you'll be given a 19th century text. How to be a Victorian. This book is quite dense, so if you're not a big bookworm, I wouldn't recommend. But mainly focuses on the upper class. But for Victorian England, I would say go watch a couple of documentaries or some podcasts just to know what Victorian England looked like. All else fails, horrible histories, because they're generally very good. So that would be useful. In terms of improving your vocabulary, the thing that I can sort of suggest you do is either go off and create word banks, or you read as much as you can, essentially. So what I'd suggest you do when it comes to reading is make sure you are reading challenging stuff. So let me flick back over. So if you go onto your exam board, any exam board, it doesn't really matter, and you just check what the subject content is, and then you will find all of the texts on there that you could potentially be doing. Choose one that's on that list because you know it's going to be challenging. Personally, when it comes to 20th century texts, I would go Of Mice and Men, To Kill a Mockingbird, Animal Farm, and Lord of the Flies. Obviously, you won't be doing all of those, but those would be my starting points because I think all of those are fab. If you want to do a Shakespeare, I'd either go Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, or Much Ado About Nothing if you want something a bit more light-hearted and not all about death. And for 19th century, I would go for Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, and A Christmas Carol. These books are really fantastic because they are really, really cheap. Because they're Wordsworth classics, because the copyright has run out, because the authors have been dead for more than 100 years. So I think these cost sort of £2-3 a book. So they're really good value for money as well. And then if you wanted to revise on grammar, punctuation, wanted to sort that out, Eat, Shoots and Leaves is a fantastic book. And this is also brilliant as well. Oxford A to Z of grammar and punctuation. For the life of me, I can't find it on my bookshelf. So that's a really nice short book as well. Right, so let me just check. CGP, yeah, is also really good. Absolutely agree with that. I do English tuition. That's my full-time job. And this will be up on YouTube later on. Right, that is me done. Thank you very much. I apologise for rushing through so quickly. I'll stop my screen share so Velina can come on now. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Have a good day, guys.
Thank you so much, Vicky. That was brilliant. Okay, and on to our final presenter of the day, Velina, with GCSE Science tuition. I'm just going to make you a host.
Hi everyone, so now we're going to talk about science revision. So let's get the PowerPoint up. So yeah, science revision, of course most of you have chemistry, physics and biology to revise. So of course that's quite a lot of work and it's probably quite time consuming. So let's firstly start with the textbooks. Okay, so when I was in my GCSEs, I was on AQA, and I also think it's quite a common exam board. So for AQA, the textbook that I would most highly recommend is to start with your course book. So hopefully most of you guys have seen this textbook from school, and this is the one that you guys should be working through in class and referring to in general when you've been learning your GCSEs. So personally, I have always preferred to study from the books that are officially done and worked, completely written by the exam board that you'll be taking. So for AQA, luckily, so AQA has written this textbook as well, so the revision guide, and also they have a workbook. And as these are written by say the examiners, I'd say these have the most the best information, and that should be, in my opinion, your point of reference. So for AQA, they also have biology, and I'm assuming physics, and they're all like written by the same people, so they fit the AQA specification perfectly. However, for say other exam boards, a lot of them don't have, say, the revision guides written by the exam boards, but they do. So CGP do specific exam board revision guides, and I'd say CGP are pretty good for science revision. Of course, it all depends on your learning style, as CGP tries to make it more funny and jokey, but they do have the correct content. However, for say AQA, I would personally prefer to take these revision guides over the CGP ones, as they're just more specific to your exam board. So what would you use for AQA Combined Science? So they should have specific ones for AQA Combined Science. So they should have similar revision guides to this, but for AQA Combined Sciences. So I just use the specific AQA ones, not the CGP ones. So then how to use these resources? So what I did when I was studying for my GCSEs is I went through all the different chapters. So I started by, say, looking at the content. So this is your contents page for chemistry GCSE, one of the pages. And then I went through all the different pages in my textbooks, and I had a project book, and in this I wrote down so I summarized each part of the chapter. So for example, if say these different colors, each color would say be C1, C2, C3, C4, EC, and then in each part I'd say put a bit on atoms, and then in that I would condense down the information provided by the textbook into my project book. So to write your notes, I would either use the main textbook or the revision guide. So the difference I found between the main textbook and the revision guide was that the main textbook had a lot more detail, and it had a lot more words that say weren't actually necessary for you to know. It's just like providing more background information, and it tries to explain it in a longer fashion, whilst the revision guide is much more concise. It has more specific points written. So I'd say they're both great, but if you are trying to, say, revise faster, the revision guide should be your go-to. So yeah, and I personally love colours. So in my book, I would use lots of different colours. I made it quite visual because I'd say I'm quite a visual learner, but of course everyone's quite different. But I found it really helpful going through the textbooks and condensing the information into my own words and writing it out in colours and making it pretty. And it really got the information into my head before I started past papers. Let me quickly look at the questions. So how do I revise physics? So for all my 3 sciences, I revised in the same way with my first place I always started was by making this book for each science, and I once again separated the book into topics, say C1, C2, and I did that for all my sciences. So so for example, if say, this is an example part of the textbook. So here it is about atoms, and here you have quite a big paragraph that tells you about, say, elements. For you to know, of course, it's quite good background reading to know these facts. However, the critical bit is that elements is a substance made up of only one type of atom. So in my notebook, in my notes, I would just put element is a substance made up of one atom. And I've taken this information from this paragraph and summarized it. So the textbooks are great. However, they do include a lot of information that is not necessarily relevant, and you don't need it for your exam questions. Okay. So after I wrote my notes, I further summarize it and I make these flashcards. So hopefully some of you guys have used flashcards before. This is an example of flashcards that I've made for university. So on one side you write, say, and here's an example for GCSE flashcards that I made. So covalent bond, you need to remember the definition. So one side of your flashcard, you write the covalent bond, and then on the other side, you write your definition, okay? So you should take this from your textbook, as that is the answer that the examiners are looking for. So when you're revising, say, you should have all, say, like the titles on one side, so covalent bond and say metal plus acid reaction on one side, and then you go through them and you're like, covalent bond, what is that? And then you say it to yourself in your head and you flip it over to check that you're right. And of course, if you've forgotten, you flip it over and read it. And these flashcards, not only are they really helpful when you're writing them down, as once again, the way at least that I think really helps is by writing the notes once and then writing them again and then rereading them. And then that like reiterates the information in your head. And so once you flip them over, you can check if you're right. And of course, if you've forgotten, then you know that your answer's on the other side. Okay, so yeah, here are some examples for covalent bond and metal and acid reaction. Let me check the question. If I revise something at random, is it going to affect the whole chapter? I'm not really sure what that means. How do I keep my flashcards safe? I usually just tie like a rubber band around each like different topics. And yeah, and I also color code my flashcards. So back here, that was what I was trying to show. So for example, my green flashcards, they're for one of my university modules and my orange ones for a different one. So I find that like color coding and separating topics by color is really helpful. What grade did I get in chemistry? I got an A star at GCSE. Okay, we'll get on to past papers in a sec. So do I recommend the AQA specification? Do you mean reading it through? I think specifications are quite good to be read through, but in general, your textbooks, they include everything that you need to know anyway. So the specifications are really just points as to what you need to know. It's in like no detail whatsoever, so it's not really helpful to actually revise. But it's quite a useful, say, tick list that you could do. Okay. So, and also, if you're quite a visual learner, say posters are a great way to revise as well. So you can condense your information greatly on posters, and of course, all the information, say for C1, you can write all the information on a poster, and it's all there ready for you to just see and learn. But of course, everyone has a different learning style, but I'd say flashcards are probably the best part of it all, as you can just keep going over it, and it's quite an easy and fun way to do it. Or you can even get, say, your parents to quiz you on them. Say, like, they ask you what's a covalent bond, and then you tell them the definition, or your friends too. So, okay. So yeah, sometimes posters are great. So online resources that I have found. So some of you hopefully have met Physics and Math Tutor. So I think this is probably my favorite resource for all science revision, GCSE and A level. And so it's got lots of information on it. So this is the way that the website appears when you press on it. And as you can see, you've got your maths, physics, biology, and chemistry revision areas. And so if, say, you press onto the chemistry area, and this is same for physics and biology, all your topics are, or your parts are split up into topics. So if you want to focus on topic 1, it's really easy to find it. And so if you press on it, so in this case, it was topic 3. If you press on it, you can see all the different resources provided by Physics and Maths Tutor. So you have some notes, and they have also made you flashcards. So if, say, it doesn't help you to write down notes and you think you're more of a reading learner, because of course some people just read and it goes into their head, these notes would be great. You print them out and they've already made you flashcards. So also there are summary notes, which also tend to be very helpful and informative. And lastly, my favorite resource is the questions by topic. So they have endless questions on different topics. And of course, with, say, chemistry, practice makes perfect. So the more questions you practice, the more, the better, the more familiar you are with the questions, and the better you answer questions in the end. But of course, before you can, say, start answering questions, you need to be sure in your content. And that's when your notes are really, really important. Okay. Let me look at the questions. So what topic in chemistry do I find do you find that people find the hardest? I think electrolysis is a pretty tricky topic, and bonding, people tend to find that quite hard. Yeah, math made easy is good. Are there any more MyTutor group sessions taking place? If you go on the group sessions website, you'll be able to see that. Do I recommend Exam Pro? I haven't actually come across that one. So do you have to follow the chapter with its topic, or can you move any topics in the chapter? So personally, I'd recommend you go through in the order that they have set out, as it's like the most structured and it leads you through it. And I would recommend not jumping about, starting from the beginning and finishing. Okay. So some other resources. Other online resources, BBC Bitesize is a great place to start with. That has lots of information. They have educational videos, and they have it for AQA, OCR, EdXL. They cover the examples, and they cover all 3 sciences. Yep, so Save My Exams also is great. They have lots of notes and past paper questions and questions by topic. By science, so we've got biology. And of course, YouTube. YouTube has lots and lots of educational videos on sciences, including MyTutor has their revision videos on YouTube. And in general, there is just lots. There's crash courses, there's stuff that's more detailed, and I'm sure that you will find something that fits your study style, and you find a good explanation when you're struggling. So I'd say YouTube is a key resource to approach if you have like a problem. So past papers, yeah. So past papers are your best friend in sciences. So once you cover your topics and your content, past papers is what you need to be doing. And the more past papers you complete, the better. Of course, it's a bit tricky currently for you guys because there's not many past papers out, but there is workbooks that you can buy. So just practice questions is so vital. So also on the Physics and Maths Tutor website, there's lots of questions, and I'd really recommend doing as many questions as possible. And for past papers, a really important thing is to always mark your answers. So always go through the mark scheme, as the mark scheme tells you exactly what the examiner wants to see. So here, so it tells you what is allowed, it tells you what to ignore. And when you see more answer schemes, when you see more mark scheme, you become very much more aware as to what exactly the examiner wants. So they're very happy with you to give just 1-word answers. They say prefer for 6-mark questions for you to put them in bullet points, because of course they're not taking a very long time to mark your paper. So the more clear and concise you write your answers, the better it is for the examiner. And your mark scheme, it really clearly tells you what the examiner wants and what they're looking for. So if you ever are doing a past paper, always be sure to mark it and take note of the mark scheme, and maybe even say highlight parts of the mark scheme. So the mark scheme is extremely useful for sciences. Let me look at questions. So yeah, there isn't many past papers on it. However, say you could find the old specification past papers, especially for AQA, it is very similar. The questions are similar, and there is a lot of, so all of the old past papers are out there. And also for that, I would probably recommend buying workbooks. So as you saw at first, the AQA workbook, the CGP workbook, so they're all designed for your new specification, and that's just, practice is so important in science. So can you write 6 markers and bullet points? Yes, you are allowed to do that. That's fine. Examiners actually quite like it. Would I recommend Khan Academy for science? So I've used it before, but not at a GCSE level. They have some really good higher videos, but I think the Khan Academy is good, especially if they do have the GCSE level. Okay, so there's some websites written in the question and answer chat if people want to read through that and note down what their peers have said. So do I recommend doing exam papers and answering exam questions and adding what you do not understand from marks being specific words to notes? Yes, I really recommend this. I think that's a great tactic. So also, if say exam papers, they let you see what you don't understand fully. So identifying these topics is crucial, and then going over and revising them. It's a really good idea. And lastly, especially for science, I would say friends. Take advantage of your friends. So say if one of you is really good at chemistry and the other one's really good at physics, study together, do a past paper next to each other, and then once you're finished, mark them and then discuss, say, what you find challenging. Especially through A-levels, lots of my friends would turn to me and ask me, so my friend had just completed a past paper and she'd be like, I struggle on this, and she would ask me all the questions and get me to explain these to her. So your friends are really, like, if someone's, say, if you struggle, message your friends, see if they can help you, as friends tend to be really helpful at explaining things, and finding study buddies, people that you can actually focus with, I'd say is a great technique. Anyway, any questions? Any questions on that? What's the best website for biology? So I say if it's a math tutor, they'd be good. They have notes on everything, and they're arranged by topic. And someone's recommended Seneca Learning, so you could check that out. Oh, why are the mark schemes so specific? That would be a question for examiners, but the best thing is that there is mark schemes, so you can see them and learn how to answer the questions. So you should really use your mark schemes as a great resource. Okay, any last learning questions? And then we'll wrap up. No. When will the 2019 papers appear? So probably after your mocks, I would expect. They're going to use those ones for your mocks, whether they're in like December or in January and February. So I'd say probably March or April they'd come out. Best way to revise physics. So I'd start by doing the notes, and then once you understand the content and doing flashcards, I'd do past papers. Past papers and practice questions are your best friend when revising sciences. Okay, so we'll finish up here then. Thank you for attending and good luck with revision. Bye.
I think we can just say a massive thank you to Velina and our other amazing tutors for their really great tips for revision. Thank you all for coming. And if you want to catch up with this session, you can find it on our YouTube channel, the MyTutor YouTube channel, which will be uploaded later today. All right, thank you everyone. Have a lovely day. Bye.